I'm Sean O'Neill and welcome to my weekly podcast where I chat to the key figures who shape and lead their industries. And today my guest is Pete Williams.
If you ever wanted to make change to healthcare, anyone over 60, I'm giving them 1, maybe 2,000 IUs of vitamin D free from autumn onwards. You would save billions of pounds.
What have you been telling somebody 25 years ago that you still tell them now?
Exercise is probably the best thing that you could do. If you're not sleeping well, if your diet's not as good as it should be, not drinking enough water, not taking enough, physical activity on a daily basis, you're going to age quickly.
I remember the first time we were on the Zoom and you said to me, health is the most complicated business that you know. And I didn't really understand what you mean. I thought, we'll get some exercise, we'll do some testing, we'll take the supplements, and it'll all end up perfect. But that's not the way it works, is it?
It's not, mate. No.
And
it's the most complicated business you'll ever get involved in, for sure.
And probably the more you know, the more you realise you actually don't know. But you've been in the field for 25 years now.
Oh God, mate, no. I suppose in practice 25 years, yeah. But in education since '89. So yeah, it's been a long old trip so far. A good one though.
But in '89, was there anybody else, or was there like a little community of people like you, or how did you?
No, I think there might have
find
been.
The path?
Well, again, you just eventually evolve into what you're doing now, and no, I mean, I think so. As I say, I started off as didn't really know what I wanted to do, but ended up doing sports science, and headed off to do sports med, and I thought that was my path. So a couple of degrees down in that, which were look, to be fair, from a point of view of overall health, were really good, because I like to think got a pretty good understanding of exercise science and exercise as medicine, and I still to this day think that first part of my career academically was as an exercise scientist. The beauty of that now, though, is that most of the magic in as far as turning people around as far as health is dominated by what you can do for exercise, and that's the beauty of it, because it's free. So, and the science is outstanding on if you get fitter, the chances of. In fact, there's a couple of major meta-analyses looking at the different divisions between the most unfit parts of the population against the super fit, and the difference between all-cause mortality between the bottom and the top is 5 times. So it's pretty significant. And you can listen to a lot of the longevity stuff with regards to we're doing this, we're doing that, but they don't stack up anywhere close to the physical exercise side. So that's been the great thing still, is that I think I've got a pretty good grasp on the exercise medicine side, and that's become complete full circle now from a point of view of the poor cousin now to the king, because all, as you say, the longevity scientists, wherever they're from, are all touting the influence of exercise. So it's definitely one of the major key things. And so, as I said to you, I did my first degree 89 to 92. I took a year out after that because I didn't have any money and I wanted to go on and do another degree. So I actually worked in a lab, in a rat lab, a pesticide lab, which was quite interesting to say the least. And then went off to the Royal Hampshire in Sheffield, which was a big teaching hospital, but as part of the University of Sheffield, did a medical science degree there. That was quite interested in sort of medical, the exercise as medicine. That was really good. And then thought I would go into the world of sports performance, and soon found out that actually no one was interested in what you were doing, and I was on the dole. So I ended up having to take a job. I couldn't get anything for here. I ended off doing a bit of travelling, and then came back with no money and realised, I needed to do something. I couldn't just be on the dole anymore. I never ever thought I would go to London, because Sheffield was a really good town. Really enjoyed my time there. But I was on the dole, poor, no money. Thought I've got to do something. So I ended up applying for a personal trainer job in London. That was 95. A tiny little place in the centre of London, just off Harley Street, and worked for a guy there who, bless him, probably didn't know too much, and so I just got my head down for a year, and then was in the point where, I sort of, without consciously doing it, moved myself into a position where I took more and more work and took more and more of his shifts on. And then I thought, I could do a better job than this. And so a couple of the people that I was working with at the time, clients, you like, one of them just gave me a nod one night saying, listen, if you think about going on your own, we'll back you. And that was it, really. So I thought, yeah, okay, I'll take a chance at that then. And so, cut long story short, I got these two little backers on, and we bought him out in a hostile takeover, which was really funny. It was quite funny. And I started I had literally two bedrooms. I had my own little place, 2 bedrooms. There wasn't even really any, there was a tiny little shower that had been built, but it was, if you know Marylebone now, and obviously you come down to see me, and the Harley Street district, it's super exclusive, but it was an absolute crap hole when I was there. It really was part of town where it's like you're right in the middle of town, just sort of north of Oxford Street, and it was down, and the high street was awful. So you go back and you think, God, that was a long time ago. And I just got my head down, Sean. It's the same thing, is that I think when you look at why do you think a lot of people do well, I don't think I'm the brightest spark out there, but I've definitely built. I'm quite good and I'm quite resilient. So I was always prepared to put the work on.
But had you any idea back then that you could or would end up help enhance people's lives to the degree that you've actually done? Was that even like a thought back then?
No, it never is it? I mean, the reality is that I needed to get a job, so that was the first thing. So everything was not out of. I don't think I ever had a clear defined path, but I never had guidance from parents. As I say, my old fella died when I was 12. He was an alcoholic, and my mum has done an amazing job to bring 4 kids up and, have to go to work. And so she was just tied into just trying to do the work, pay the bills and keep it going. So, you were essentially a bit feral, really. So, no, I drifted in, I was pretty bright at school, but not the brightest spark in the world. And then went to sixth form because, I enjoyed that side. I was good at sport. So, I didn't know anything else to do. It's like, I'll keep going to school. And then when I finished sixth form, I thought, yeah, okay, I'll go to uni. But no path. Yeah, okay, like sports, I'll do sports science. And that was it. And then after the first degree, I was like, I really like this. I loved the student life, and thought, well, I don't want to give this up because I've got no idea what I want to do. So that's when I went off and did another one. And of course, there's only so much you can do with no money, where you're like, oh, okay, I better think about. And so, everything, a lot of stuff was forced hand, going down to London. Never thought I'd ever go to London. I was desperate. But once I was in that situation, I think it was just a bit of, finding my feet in London, which is, it's a big old city when you don't know anyone, and, you've got to be quite resilient with it. Things changed. And I started having this really good little business that was all word of mouth, dominated by the exercise side, but obviously because I've got a bit of that medical background in there, we started doing real basic stuff like, we'll test your cholesterol levels and all this. It was real basic stuff. Life changed for me, and I would say academically again, about 96. So it wasn't long after I'd been down. I had an osteopathic mate who said to me, listen, there's this guy coming into town. He's only here once a year. You should definitely go and listen to him. And this was Dr. Jeff Bland, and he did this just incredible day on the new evidence of where we are with cardiovascular disease and heart disease, and it was just amazing, mate. It was literally mind-blowing that this guy could talk about the science and like real up-to-date science in such eloquent storylines, and he was so, you know, a master of his subject. I was just like, wow, fucking hell, this is not
what year was this?
I think that was 96. And it was all about, the whole day was called The Heart on Fire, and it was really about how, you know, what we understood about cardiovascular disease and what causes heart attacks is actually not what we think it is. It's about oxidative stress, it's about inflammation, and, you know, whilst cholesterol is a component of that, it's not the be-all and end-all. Not that you could ignore it, but it was just like, wow, that was amazing. And that was it for me. And so 96, I think, 97, I joined the Institute for Functional Medicine and became a member of them, which is an American institution. 97, and then pretty much from 97, I started going on the postgraduate medical education pathway, and then went through all the training, and then got on the certification program. And I suppose in the world that I am, if you like, if you want to call it functional medicine, the most noted sort of qualification worldwide to sort of, you know, to sort of something that you sort of, you know, you've had to go through a pretty robust process to get the certification. So they started the certification process, and I was in the first group worldwide. It's the same thing, just early adopter, knew it was right. That lecture blew me away. I'm like, wow, if this is medicine, I'm in.
You knew this was going to be your path?
Yeah. So just one of those, and I think that was the first time ever where actually, you know, you knew. It was never like I knew where I was going, but once after that day produced that lecture, I was like, wow, this is definitely it. So literally I went over the States once or twice a year since 97. First, as you say, I was in the first group worldwide to get the certification. That was 2013. So here we are now. So to sort of the application of it all. And we've had years, you know, years of being able to apply it, which I think is the key difference now, because it's all buzz. It's all the buzz now.
It's incredible. It's exploding.
It's exploded. The risk, I think, for that is, I suppose almost like the way to think about it is it's exploded, and a lot of people are jumping on the bandwagon, and it's quite unregulated. And it's a little bit like, you know, the general public, I don't think, know what a good sort of functional medicine practitioner is. So in many ways you can do a weekend course and call yourself that, but it's a little bit like, you know, you're suddenly spending a lot of money with the student who's just done 2 weeks of their degree, as opposed to the consultant who's been in practice, you know, for 30 years, and no one really knows the difference.
Well, for me to find you just took years, because I really didn't know what I was looking for. I was looking for a way to understand what health and well-being is, have tests done, and ultimately these results will end up in showing me a path forward. But what I was getting done before I had met you is I was going to other companies that were doing these big, lovely tests, bloods and other samples, but they were giving me a load of data.
You don't know what to do with it.
And they would give me a brief description of what that meant. And it's like taking somebody off the street and putting them into my business and say, right, okay, this is what my business does. Good luck.
Yeah.
So I go home with all this information, pages, and I'm reading, I'm thinking, but what does that mean? Oxidative stress, what's that like? I literally had to Google half the words that was put in the summary of what I had to do.
That's a massive problem with it.
And then, but I thought I can't give up. I had to then go and try to understand how I can find somebody that can help me through this. And as usual, I'll keep going till I find that person. What was amazing about you is you qualified me. You didn't say yes, Sean. You actually made me explain to you, why I wanted to do this. You didn't just say, I'm going to take your money and I'm going to do results. You actually wanted to make sure I was the right fit.
Yeah, and I'd say that's because we've been in practice for such a long time. So and again, it like everything in business, isn't it? You learn from your mistakes. So we have a Shelley, who's our front of house. We almost have like a system that we have to. And it's not like we interview patients, but there's nothing worse for us. When I think if you think you're at your top of your game, there's nothing worse than us getting a patient on board who's not in the right space to make the right journey, because not only are they going to spend, which is a little bit like the situation we're talking about, thousands of pounds on tests, and then it's not going to go anywhere. We've got to make sure that we feel as though we're in a place where that we can take that patient down a journey as well. Mm-hmm. So that's why, we get so many people who come to us with the same thing, and they think that's, we're going to change it around in 3 months. And as you say, how long have we been going now? 5 years? And as I said last night at the chat last night, is that the medicine that we do for you is literally like, we are consistently planning for the future so that we're offsetting any of the problems that we think may happen, or trying to at least always be building resources into that. So we're slowing them down. And as you say, you've got to have the right people at the right time to be able to go, yeah, this makes sense to me. And have that understanding that the problem you've got, isn't it, is that we're in a world where we've all grown up with, you only go and do something about it when there's a problem. And so we exist still, look, I'm not knocking the NHS or anything, but we exist in a disease model of health. And so you don't do anything until, you've had the heart attack or you've been diagnosed with a disease. And, as I said to you, these chronic diseases, whether it's cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, diabetes, you name it, they can take decades to slowly creep, and that's why, they tend to start turning up when you're in your 40s and 50s, because you've had 2 or 3 decades of maybe going down the wrong pathway.
And this is where I wanted to find out how I can prevent or reduce the possibility of me getting sort of sick too prematurely. Like, we're all going to get sick and we're all going to get old, but I thought, I just want to, what's the point of doing all of this if one day I'm not going to be here, I'm not going to get a chance to enjoy myself, or I'm going to be operating at a level much less or a lot less enjoyable.
It's like we said last night, didn't we, is that there's no point you being a successful businessman if your best asset of all of those businesses is falling apart, and your best asset is always you. Mm-hmm. So you have to be investing into yourself on a daily basis, because as I said to you, that little presentation last night, the business of Sean, and I think that's absolutely the model of how you need to be looking after yourself. Is that, lucky we have the capacity to have, done a lot of background on you, like your genetics. A lot of those genetics, we've been able to play them out as well, which I think is the most important thing, is over several years. And so what we've done with that over those years is we're starting to build this template, aren't we, about, we know what we need to work on, we know why we need to work on it, and we also know how much capacity we have when you slip off the wagon, if you like. And you don't have much. You're just one of those, as I say, is where, unless we're keeping you on a straight and narrow and you're doing a good job, there's a risk that if you slip off, then things are going to slip quite reasonably quickly.
The bit that fascinates me, whenever you showed me my dopamine levels, and you, without knowing me, told me what type of person I am, what makes me tick, or give me an example. You were able to nearly talk about my past, as if you could look into you just by literally looking at my dopamine.
Well, so that was when we did the gene panel. It's the one that we call DNA Mind, isn't it? And we did that for there's three reasons why we did that one. Number one, we're looking at quite a few genes that are associated with neurodegeneration. So in a sense, dementia, Alzheimer's. So we wanted to have a look at that because that's important, because no one wants to go getting into their 60s and 70s and can't remember anything anymore. So we wanted to have a look, and as we know on that one, as I say, you are, as we talked about last night, the main gene still, and look, I think we've got to be clear that I think the more and more we go along, the more we realise that whilst genetics are an important part of your risk as you go forward, they're not as important as we used to think they were. So as I said, 25%, maybe a third is, your risk of developing disease is always has some degree of genetic lead. But we think maybe 2/3 is actually, but it's a question of how you're going to live your life. And the whole point about the genetics that we do is that we have every gene test that we do on you. We're only picking the genes that we know, number one, has really good science on them, but also really good science that allows us to make changes to your lifestyle that will change the way that gene expresses itself. And we know on the Alzheimer's side, and the ApoE gene, you have a gene variant on that puts your risks just on that gene itself by about 4 times more than what we'd expect to see in a normal population. About 30% of the population has that. So whilst we can't ignore it, and that doesn't mean to say you're going to go on and get Alzheimer's, because we have, so that when you look at that gene, unfortunately there's going to be a small amount of the population that have an E4 gene on that side, a result. And that gene puts them at 16 times more at risk than a normal population of developing Alzheimer's just by that gene. So it's a very significant result. But I think I can think of 3 or 4 of our patients that we've got on board at the moment that are ApoE4. But
what can you do in your environment, lifestyle to counteract that?
Well, look, that's a good question. Again, we're talking about risk. So it doesn't mean to say, it might be at 50 times risk of certain things, but it doesn't mean to say you're going to go on to get it. But and as I said to you, you said the more and more you understand this, the more and more you realise it. Holy shit, this is a real. It's just as a, there's another rabbit hole that exists with another rabbit hole. So whilst I think what we're doing is a really good job of leading that sort of personalised and precision-led medicine field with some of the work that we do, we're still guessing. But what we're doing is guessing less than most people, and we're more precise with more people because of the way we set our files up. So whilst you can't give any guarantees, it's a little bit like saying when you have a business, okay, we've got this department that's maybe always going to have a problem. So therefore, we probably need to look after it better, nurture it better, put more resources into it. So that's what we do, and that's what we've done with you and with those people, is it's making sure, again, they're doing some of the fundamental basics, right, Sean? And I'll say to anyone before they even come into us, is like, if you're not doing the basics of, health correctly, you're on a hide into nothing. So if you're not sleeping well, you're stressed, which most people are, your diet's not as good as it should be, and you're not exercising, it's a waste of time having thousands of pounds worth of testing. So some people are just like, listen, go away and have a think about those and get those sorted. And the reason why I say that is because all the gold dust is in those groups. And I think people get the new side of medicine, they get it the wrong way around. We have people coming in that think you're going to do these, well, a little bit like you said, I'll do these thousands of pounds worth of cool tests on you. You'll take some supplements and you'll be sorted. And it's complete opposite. Because as I said to you, these test results are only indicative of, where you are in time and what's going on. And we've got to take a lot of steps back and find out, what does this mean? And, it literally comes back to most people don't do the basics well enough. And most of those basics are free as well, and they're expecting the magic bullet, and there isn't one. And so, again, that's why we really have a Shelley at the front of house, weaning those people out, because we get so many of them. But you also get this other group like you that generally comes from referrals of people we've already worked with who get it You know, who understand it like, yeah, this is like, I've got to cultivate this business for the rest of my life. And I've got to understand it to some degree. I've got to be in charge of it. Obviously, like, you know, you have to be in charge of your health. So that's the other thing that we have to be very clear about, because it's not my job. You know, my job is to just show you the path.
Yeah, you're the researcher. You're taking these years of knowledge, you're stripping it down, and you're giving me the direction and saying, right, over to you to see how you perform.
And then you've got to go and do it.
I remember, like, I take things when I commit to something. I like really commit, and I'm all in. And I remember you said to me one day, I took this sort of health and well-being side of it, and all the things that, you know, the information and knowledge that you passed on to me, and I nearly took it too serious. I remember you said to me one day, because we realised that health and well-being is about also relaxing and enjoying it. And you said to me, Sean, just fucking chill out, it's okay. I was nearly, if I missed my supplements, I would be like, oh, I missed my supplements, or if I missed this, and I'm like, hold on a minute, this is probably doing me more damage.
Yeah, and we have a lot of those as well. We have a lot of the worried well. And, you know, the problem with that is, of course, you know, is that they end up getting unhealthy because they're overly obsessed by it. And you've got to find a balance between it all. Now, different personality types, again, that's sometimes you know why we've always got Rich dipping in and out with us, Rich Mo, because what Rich is, how we invest into all our associates and me is that we, you know, a lot of the time it's more important to, you know, in medicine, in my opinion, it's more important to understand the person than the problem, because if we understand the person, we can have a much better understanding of how we apply what we've got to do. And so that's so crucial, because again, we'll have these people with different personality types, you know, perfectionism traits, where they're just overwhelmed by all the things that they've got to do, and overwhelmed with, I need to do it in a perfectionism state. And so I suppose you have to have a good cop, bad cop relationship with them. And so what I say to everyone at the beginning, certainly the way I work, is that at some stage as we go forward, we're going to have some disagreements, and that's okay, that's part of it. But it's really important that we do, because there'll be stuff that you'll be doing that, you know, needs to change, and I have to tell you, and you've got to be cool with that. But flip side as well is that, you know, maybe there's something that the way we do that you're unhappy with, and you need to let us know, but that's part and parcel of the journey. And it's really important that that has to happen, because it's not easy, as you know. I mean, you're very dedicated, mate. So fair enough to you. You're almost like an ideal patient for us. And we know things will work out because, as you said to you, when you've committed to it, you'll do it. But that doesn't mean to say it's going to be perfect all the way. And there's always bumps in the road. So the way we set up, as you say, we're always in contact, aren't we? We're always working towards something. And, you know, the analogy is the quarterly accounts. Where are we currently? What are we working on? And then there comes a time frame, isn't it, about, okay, well, let's have a look at how well we've done in that phase. And then we can, like you do, use your debrief. Well, over the last 3 or 4 months, what's happened? What have we done? How well are we doing? Okay, let's plan for the next 4. And you roll and roll and roll like that.
I found that I've nearly gone full circle, and I have looked into the marginal gains by understanding some complex adaptogen I can take, or like something that can give me that 1% gains. But I've realized that my sleep, there's things that I've been ignoring. I've decided to sleep 4 hours a night because I need to catch up on my work, or I want to do more things in my life. I'm thinking, I'm putting all this effort in to try and be healthy, but one of the most important things I'm missing is I'm not getting my sleep. And I've trained myself into thinking that that's okay. And that's where the likes of you just brings it back to, you know, what's real. You know, your exercise. Like we touched on sleep. Can we and could we go back to that, because it's so obvious that sleep is such a important part of our life, but yet so many of us just miss that bit.
Yeah, it's good. Again, I think sometimes a lot of people just, they're just ignorant of it. That's all. They just don't know. And I think life also dictates that, people just don't understand the importance of where you are for sleep and what it does for you. And pretty much, as you say, it's the time your body really does all its repair work. Mm-hmm. And so, if you're missing out, you're in trouble. So, if I can give you some little examples of that, I'll give you some cool examples just to give an indication of, sleep. So I have a very simple thing you've got to think about is sleep is one of the sections of health that just umbrellas everything. So, and again, whether it is, you'll have a significantly increased risk for Alzheimer's if you're not sleeping well. We're not quite sure what we think is the optimal sleep time and quality. We think somewhere between maybe 7 to 9 hours is optimal, but that's is going to depend on how an individual is. So there's always a personalised variance. But let me just give an example. There were some studies done on sleep and its influence on obesity. So the less sleep you get, the fatter you're going to be. Which, because sleep has this aspect of, and they've done some really cool studies on, there was one in sleep medicine, I think it was 2015, and what they did is they actually took a group of young, fit 20-year-olds and they put them through about 3 days of inadequate sleep. And I think what we were looking at is sleep deprivation, and I think the sleep deprivation, they qualified at 5 hours. Now, the joke about that is that that you spent many years trying to get just having 4 hours. So they defined sleep deprivation in this study at 5 hours. And even after 2 nights, what started to happen is that the brain, because of the lack of sleep, starts to recognize that it hasn't had enough recovery. And so what the brain centers do is they start making you try and bring some resources back because you've lost the capacity to get all that restoration from the sleep. And you start to become addicted to highly refined sweet things. And that's how your brain tries to recover from the lack of sleep.
So after a night out, you wake up in the morning, you think, oh, I want to have a fry, or I want to eat some croissants, and you want to eat some sugar.
So one of the signs we always ask if we're doing people with the weight loss is that how well do you sleep? Because your brain, and the evidence is very clear, is that your brain recognizes that it's not had enough. And suddenly you start, I'm desperate for a bit of simple sugar. And actually what it showed on that literary study is that these subjects were ingesting about 200 more calories a day of simple sugars. Now, when you equate that to a year, it's around about, I think it was 21 pounds it equates to. So it's a lot of weight. Theoretically, it's a lot of weight. So, these are the things that we see. So, and we have a component of our business where we're looking at after, a lot of execs, the corporate athlete. And they keep wondering why they're, even though they're doing all this exercise and stuff like that, why am I not losing weight? I'm like that because you're on 3 or 4 hours a night of sleep. And it's not going to change until you change your sleep. And so that's just one example of the importance of why sleep is so crucial.
We touched on exercise before, and I've gone through, I think, almost every exercise program imaginable. And I did a 4-day week, 3 days strength and 1 day conditioning program, and I did it religiously. I got amazing results when it came to fitness and building muscle. But I noticed I was putting on weight, and I thought to myself, I'm doing 4 days training, 4 hours training. How can I actually be putting on weight? And I realised, well, Matt, who's my fitness coach, said to me, well, are you doing any zone 2? Like, are you moving? Are you walking? And I was like, well, maybe not. And what I realised, because I was doing such heavy training, I thought that that's going to burn my calories. And I actually then realised that I did less of the let's go for a walk in the evening, because I felt like I feel tired. And I actually realised I put on weight where if I wasn't building the muscle and I just went for my hour or two walk, or got, as people say, the steps in.
Yeah.
And it was mind blowing to think all that effort still didn't affect my weight. Okay, I got other results.
But if you remember, we've also run some genetics around your capacity to mobilize fat stores from exercise. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And you don't do it very well at all. So, and this is, I think this is quite a cool bit that we did with you, because what we actually showed on that is that, and I think this is a really cool bit for everyone.
So many people can relate to this.
Yeah, so many can relate to this, and it's almost like, but I'm doing 3 hours of yoga a week, why I'm losing weight? And so some of the genetics that we do, are, as we've done with you, are associated with how good do your genes mobilize fat stores from exercise, and we know yours are pretty crappy at it. And what does that mean? It means, as I said to you, Sean, you're going to have to accept that it's unlikely that we're ever going to get you to be ripped or have really low body fat without starving you and absolutely beasting you with, hours and hours of weekly exercise. So it is what it is. As you say, you get some good stuff coming through the genes, you get some stuff that's maybe not as favorable for you, and you don't have that. And actually, in some of the gene companies, they've worked out, they've got some nice little algorithms that gives us an indication of how many, we call it metabolic hours, sort of a measure of measuring sort of how much energy you would burn in an hour from certain exercise. And I think we measured on yours that your MET value per week was 25. No, actually it might have been more than that. It was 30 MET hours. And obviously we work out what that is. And what it showed us, it was almost like something that you needed to do about 6 or 7 hours of exercise a week before it started to have a visible influence on your fat stores. And unfortunately, and to be fair, if we take that back to hundreds of thousands of years ago, they're the sort of genes that would have made you survive quicker than others, because they're super efficient at storing stuff and holding on to it, which, in very hard times when it's cold weather and maybe you haven't been able to stock up for the winter, you'd have probably survived. Whereas me, we were laughing, me and our kid this morning, we have 6 packs as kids, that sort of stuff, it's just, the gift that we were given, one of the good ones with all the bad ones that come with it as well. And I think that's the beauty of the journey that we consistently take our patients on, like you, is that we can answer many of these questions so that you don't get frustrated. And we have many people who come in who go, oh God, exercise is useless. Why aren't I losing weight? Because I'm doing 3 hours of yoga a week, and we're like, yeah, but we've done your genetics, and you need to actually triple that amount before you're going to see noticeable fat, loss results from your exercise. And just one key thing on that: unless you're doing a lot of exercise in general, if you're using exercise as the only modality for weight loss, you're probably going to be disappointed. So you shouldn't really be using exercise as the only modality for weight loss, because it's not actually that great.
What else would you do?
Well, I think for me, it's always, you lose weight in the kitchen. You have to go onto some kind of, if you do want to lose weight, it is predominantly some degree of calorie restriction in some way. But on all the other stuff, understanding how you fit in the bigger picture with regards to, if you're not sleeping well, then you're definitely going to have problems there. If you're super stressed, you're probably going to have problems there. So again, it's identifying that bigger picture and what's going on at any one time.
Well, my glasses always half full, never half empty. And whenever well, I guess most of us want to be lean and ripped and in great shape. But when you explain to me, Sean, it's not really going to work for you, or it's going to be very difficult for you.
It's going to be tough for you. Yeah.
And if I get there, it may not last very long.
No.
That was a bit of a relief, because it helped me be okay and accept that this is where I am. And when you said to me, there's a very good chance someone with my gene type could be obese,
yeah,
or heads towards obese. You said to me, Sean, it's actually a pretty good job you're doing. And it was one of those it was like a weight off my shoulder to say, well, okay, I have to accept that I'm not going to have 12% body fat.
Yeah.
But if I get to low 20s, see it as a well done. And that was a game changer for me, because then I just.
I think a lot of people, as I said to you, I think we have these ideal norms about how we want to be and where we want to go. And I think that's a really good example of with you. We've taken the pressure off you, I think, in many ways, because, as I said to you, you've probably, we had that conversation, didn't we, about, I'm sure everyone wants to be lean and buffed and stuff like that. And you've tried really hard at it, and as I say, is that
I've just lowered my expectations and become happier with the fact that I'm going to be here.
We're always trying to give people positive psychology from a point of view of, mate, you're doing a super job, but you're not. It's highly unlikely you're going to be ripped, or it will be. It's not that you can't get ripped, but it'll be real hard work to get you down to that point, and you'll hate it. The amount of work that you've got to put in, probably the amount of lack of calories you're probably going to have to do, and you'll only be able to sustain that for a very short period of time before your body goes, time to put it back on shore and bring me back to a little bit more normality. And that's what you're going to see. And if you understand that, again, you do become a bit easier with it. And as I said to you, you do have some predispositions for probably holding on a little bit more body fat, because we've done that and we've identified that. So you're probably doing as good a job as you can. And, and as I said, this is not about, negative psychology because you can't quite get it down. It's like, but mate, you would probably be quite overweight if you haven't been doing this. So that's the beauty of having all that data and playing it out over time, is because you can give people where, I suppose we have these population norms that we think we should be, and then we get the precision-led data that we've done with you of all this time and say, mate, this is a really good job. If you can hold this on, you're doing about as best as you can within the circumstances. So that's where it's been really helpful. And as far as your dopamine genes, as you say, we've done quite a lot of genes around. We talked about it, didn't we? I think I did a little bit of a chat last night about when we're working people through long-term strategies, many people sabotage their health journey, and it's an unconscious process. I don't know why I do it, but I can't keep, I keep eating that food. I don't know why I'm drinking, but I can't help myself. And for most of them, they can't. And so obviously we do gene variations associated with addictive behaviors, sex, drugs, rock and roll, alcohol, smoking, etc. Because we want to understand addictive behaviors, or behaviors that are going to stop us from getting the goals that we want from a health perspective. And so that's been incredibly helpful, because, we've seen some with you, and we had a bit of a laugh last night, didn't we, about, which, mate, is really funny, because you just don't do it anymore. And I know we identified on those dopamine and genetics, didn't we? And dopamine is this neurotransmitter that is involved with helping the brain function really well. It brings a lot of focus to your brain. But it makes you feel good, dopamine, and it's a reward. It's the reward neurotransmitter. So, open your phone and, you're looking on Instagram, dopamine, massive dopamine hit before, if you're going to go shopping. And actually, there's some really cool studies on cocaine. And what they found is actually the highest dopamine stimulation is just before you sniff it. So it's not actually the cocaine, I'm just about to get the reward. So, and you know, we talked about this, didn't we? Is that
is it the same with the gambler?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. So
you go to Las Vegas and the excitement,
of course,
of almost winning.
Yeah, but it's also, you know, when you look at why do millionaires keep on buying what they're buying? You know, the new car. It's not the car. It's the dopamine hit of buying the car. Or, you know, it's a little bit like, we do have some, I think we've got a couple of patients where they're obsessive shoppers. So it's not the actual, I want the shoes. You know, it's the shoes that is the reward. It's going to get the shoes is the reward. And as soon as you've got the shoes, then you want to go and do it again.
I think we've all gone through that.
Well, we do.
And for me, it's the deal, the next deal in business.
The whole point about this is that I think we live in an adversely stressful world. And the more stressed the day is, the more likely humans self-medicate on a daily basis. And what I mean by that is that we all want to feel a little bit of reward from the day. And so the risk for us is that when we're trying to take a patient down a health path, that's why you've got to understand the bigger picture. And the more stressed they are, the more likely, particularly if you've got dopamine gene variations like you, it puts you much more at risk of never having enough dopamine to give you the soothing reward that you want. Now, that can be seen in a good and a bad thing, because it means that you're always out to try and get the new business, which is part and parcel of what you've done. So, you know, whilst we can't say 100%, the reason why you have, 38 businesses now? You know, it is, I think there's a component of you getting off on the dopamine hit on a daily basis, because your dopamine cup genetically is never as full as other people who have normal dopamine gene variations, and you don't. So that means that you always have a little less dopamine around than probably more people. So it means that you are at more risk of addictive behaviors, which, to be fair, when we started, you know, there were a few in there. And I think what we've been able to do over time is identify them and try and put them into play. And, you know, that's quite complex, but it's a lot to do with...
I remember when you said to me the first time that you were frustrated on the calls with me, because as if I wasn't even present.
Well, yeah, so as I said to you, that was the interesting thing when we were on Zoom. I remember saying to Shelley to say, not so sure on Sean. He sort of looks like he really wants our advice, but then he's all over the place. He's not really present in the meetings. And I know it's funny, I was speaking to Dawn, your business partner, and she was saying that your other business partner, oh no, it was you last night, wasn't it, when we were coming home. You know, it's like, but that's the thing, isn't it? Sometimes you never listen.
There has been times just that I have been in meetings and I have walked out in mid-conversation, not thinking that I was being rude, but I just had missed that part, that I just wasn't present. I've walked out, made a cup of tea, come back in as if I wasn't needed for that part, and only be told later, like, what the fuck have you done?
Yeah.
Because somehow I just I went missing in my own head. But when I get told that, and then look at some of the people I know, and I'm like, frustrated me because they weren't present, and I thought, that's being rude.
Yeah.
But they just didn't know.
But we all have our blind spots, don't we?
Yeah.
And unless we're identifying that, you know, and as I said to you, you know, it's quite a complex relationship, ours, because we have to have that capacity to go, mate, you know, do you realise that, you know, when we're in our meetings, sometimes you're all over the place. Now, I'm not saying that's all down to, you know, your lack of dopamine and the lack of your capacity to focus for long periods of time, but it's a component of it. You don't do it anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess, as you say, your genes can take you down a path, but also your lifestyle, environment, and how you train yourself can also then put you on a path. And through self-discovery, you've obviously explained all this to me in now a level where I can repeat or really understand. But a lot of us intuitively know where we stand. We sometimes need you to spell it out. But what I realized, and without even being able to explain why, I've known that I naturally want to go down the path that isn't best for me. You know, as you said, the sex, drugs, rock and roll lifestyle, and that place that gives you temporary pleasure, the excitement. But through my snooker career, it gave me the excitement when I would pick up the trophy or become Irish snooker champion, or, you know, play in the world championships. That was exciting. So that gave me my dopamine hit. The business deal, the one thing that actually gives me my dopamine hit is having people like you in my life, where I can gain more knowledge, or it can be exciting to be, you know, honoured to be able to sit with you and so many people like you with so much knowledge that I can actually, that gives me, and it keeps me on a really good path, instead of being, you know, doing, you know, out late and doing other things that wouldn't be so good for my health.
Yeah, I mean, it's important that you surround yourself with people who allow you to be a better version of yourself. You know, I think, well, and certainly, you know, I think we're, you know, there's the sort of groups that you want to hang out in for sure.
How important, this is something that the topic gets mentioned so much now that it seems to be new on the scene, is your gut in all of this? Yeah,
so I suppose it comes back to that question, you know, what is a human? And a human is a superorganism. The technical term in the scientific literature is called holobiont. So we are holobionts, and what that means is that we're a combination of different species that generates this organism, and we all live in this human body. We're slightly, if we do it by cell number, we're more bacterial cells than human cells. So by looking at that, humans are more bacteria than they are their own human cells. And that's really important, because what that means is that when we get really sick people who come to see us, we've got to think about them in two ways, not just what's going on with their human cells, but also what's happening with their bacterial cells. The simplest way to think about this, and I think what we've got really good at, I think I've got quite good at this over time, is that you have to become a storyteller. Because if you can't translate difficult science into simple stories, you lose your patients, because it's too, I mean, there's so much going on. As I said to you, we've been going 5 years, and as I said to you, we could literally sit your file on the table again and go through it again and say, this is why this means this, and you're like, wow, okay, you know, because there's so much data that's going into you at any one time. So we've got to be able to take these complex stories and just really bring them down to simple strategies so that they can remember. And so one of the things that we say is that, given that you're more bacterial than human, wouldn't it be important that we at least have a look at how they're doing? And so we do a lot of that. As you know, we've done a lot with you. And so what we've learned is that we used to think most of our body was sterile, and actually that's the last 25 years, it's the complete opposite of what we know now. And the other thing to think about in science and medicine is that theories and standard practice are only standard practice until new good research comes in, and actually, Jesus, you know what we were telling everyone 3 years ago, it's just not true anymore.
What have you been telling somebody 25 years ago that you still tell them now?
Well, I think, you know, exercise is probably the best thing that you could do. That would be one of the things. They knew that 25 years ago, and it takes 25 years to come full circle again with more data sets to go. They were definitely onto something like that. And again, I bring it back to, you can spend thousands of pounds with us, but the reality is, if you're not sleeping well, if your diet's not as good as it should be, and look, you know, there's ways that you can really look into those. But if you're not doing those on a basic level, not drinking enough water, you know, not taking enough, you know, physical activity on a daily basis, you're stressed out. You know, you're gonna age quickly. You know, so it's like I said to you, you can spend thousands and thousands of pounds. That when we get, as I say, we get these executives all the time. They've been to, you know, 10 grand on a, you know, a full body MRI and all this done. They like that. What do I do with this? Yeah. Because that's where, as I say, you've got to have these very specialised people who can take that and go, okay, here's how we build you a program, and here's how that play.
You've mentioned water.
Let me go back to the bacteria, mate, because I think it's a really, really important thing. So we know that every pretty much mucosal surface, and when I mean mucosal, generally mouth, nose, sinuses, GI tract, anus, all that have, and skin and everything has a bacterial community that is unique to you. And in very simple terms, you have to make sure that bacterial community is happy. When bacteria are happy, particularly in your tummy, they create lots of molecules and metabolites that they push out of the GI tract, and it goes all the way around the body, particularly the brain. A couple of the noted ones are called short chain fatty acids. So what happens is, when you have we can actually measure happy bacteria, and we've done that on you several times, and I know you don't know that we've done it, but we do it, and we measure it through a measure we call short chain fatty acids. So short chain fatty acids are these acids that your happy bacteria produce. And generally what we're trying to do with your GI tract to make it healthy is make sure that there's much more healthy bacteria than bad bacteria. And if we keep that balance correct, generally they're going to do a great job for you. There's a massive factory under there ready to want to, for them having a nice home to live in and you carry them around, as long as you feed them the right stuff, they will do the job that you need them to do. And as a consequence of you giving them a house to live in, they will produce these short chain fatty acids. And those short chain fatty acids travel around the body, particularly the brain, and help modulate particularly your immune system. Keeps it happy, talking to it, keeps the brain happy, talking to them. And you need that to happen all the time. For most people when they come into us, particularly the ones, autoimmune patients, the chronic fatigue patients, they've gone through a very conventional medicine model before they come to us. And don't get me wrong, the conventional medicine model has done an amazing job of trying to have a look at them. But they've not asked that question, and that question is, should we have a look at what the bacterial aspect of you is? And as soon as we do that, we see these patients, particularly women with multi-systemic dysbiosis. They've got sinus infections, they've got gut dysbiosis, generally IBS. They probably had the IBS for 20 years. They have got bacterial vaginosis, consistent thrush infections, and again, this is their life on and off for the last 15 to 20 years. So that's why you've got to do a good background. As soon as you start understanding that story, you're like that, I bet these bacteria aren't happy. And you've got to be really good. So what you've got to do is, again, because obviously working with us isn't cheap, as you know, and when you start getting into testing is expensive. So what we've always tried to do is make sure that we almost have this like clinical confidence tree. And so myself and our guys, we have to do that really robust background to say, okay, you've got some gum recession, your gums aren't great, a bit of periodontal disease, you've had IBS, you've got bacterial vaginosis, you have thrush. I want to make sure that you've got all these prerequisites that think that we should probably have a look at you on test, rather than just, as you know, doing thousands of pounds worth of tests without those tests being directed, because you're showing the signs and symptoms. We should have a look. So we're very careful that we only suggest testing to our patients if we really feel as though we need it at that time, and it's very specific, because you can do thousands of pounds worth of testing. And so with people, you really want to, when we've got really sick people, particularly on the bacterial side, we do, like we do with you, probably twice a year, we'll do a stool test, because that stool test is giving us that picture about, is everything happy? Are we producing, are those bacteria working well for you? Are there any infections that we might just want to think about, and any dysbiosis or bacterial communities that we might want to change slightly? And again, we're in the area of, so probably most people know about probiotics, but what we've learned about probiotics is that we used to think that if you took a probiotic, it would, if you like, repopulate some of your bacterial communities, and they don't do that at all. But what they do is they act like extra policemen. And so, if you've got something like IBS or something like that, or you've got some inflammation in your gut, what bacteria do is that, and bacteria, again, we're moving into the world of using strain-specific bacteria as well, i.e. strains that have been cultured and actually have decent research to say, for the job that we need to do, this is the strain we probably want to choose. And I think that's where we'll end up in 10 years. In 10 years, we will end up going, if you've got, I don't know, let me have an example. If you've got Crohn's disease, here's the 2 strain specific or 3 strain specific bacteria that we know are going to do the best job. Well, I think where we are at the moment is that everyone's throwing probiotics at them. Most of them are probably very poor quality, so they probably don't do anything. Actually, they probably get the gastric juices kill them anyway, so they don't get through. So again, it can be a real minefield with regards to what you take, how you take. And I think you're probably, if you're just taking a probiotic because you're just taking a probiotic, it's probably 50-50 it's going to do any good. And that's not just from a point of view of the quality, because there's real differences in quality. But you've got to keep those bacteria happy. So that's one of the departments of you that twice a year we just tap into, and if we need to make, again, just like the quarterly accounts, we'll have a look and we'll make some changes. What I would say on that, the key to this is that if I've learned anything as regards to things coming full circle again, fibre is the probably number one thing I would go back to and go, this is almost like the new superfood. Fibre. Doesn't matter where you get it from, all different fibres, but it comes down to, again, I think we're looking at the more plant foods that you eat, the more diversity of plant foods, the more diversity of fibres, the happier your gut is going to be. And we've moved into this world, as I said to you, is that you have prebiotics. And prebiotics are fundamentally plant foods that are the favourite meal of your probiotic experience.
It's whole foods. It's not get your Weetabix in the morning. You've
well,
had your
look,
fibre.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, Weetabix. There's good and bad in Weetabix. There's a reasonable amount of. It's like all bran. I mean, people could slag all bran off. It's a processed food, but there's a lot of fibre in it. And again, I think what's happening in social media world, which I think makes it worse, is that you always get the extreme story, and then I could come back and go like that. In certain individuals, I think all brands are a pretty damn good choice. It's very high in fibre, and maybe for this patient, it's going to be absolutely perfect for them. But with other patients who maybe have a gluten risk of being, having issues with gluten, that might not be the best choice for them. But again, what fibre does is that fibre is almost like, the sort of favourite meal for your bacterial communities, and they love it. And once they love it and take that, then they can start making the short chain fatty acids for you.
Can you eat too much fibre?
It's a good question. I think you could, and I think, if you're going down that pathway, there comes a point where you can't stop having a poo. Your poos are massive, and like, Jesus, I don't need to probably do that. And I've sort of tried that on myself, and I think there's a component of that. But I would probably say the vast majority of the population are just not getting enough, and that's a real problem. It's a real problem for, stuff like, it helps with cholesterol levels, bringing those down. It helps with weight control, and again, lots of meta-analyses over 20 or 30 years to prove that. I think this is what we've got to be careful with research as well, because anyone can throw one paper up saying, oh no, okay, you shouldn't do this anymore. But as people who are in that field, you've got to be very cautious. Oh yeah, because there's been 10,000 studies that have been done over the last 50 years that completely say the opposite of what someone has stood up on social media and said. It's a bit like, there's a bit in the moment with regards to oatmeal. You'll see a lot of stuff from social media influencers talking about oatmeal is just poison. And it's just like, it's complete rubbish. Because, and the problem about this is where the problem is, if you're going to get your information from social media, you've got to be incredibly careful. Because what happens is, there's some very simple things that I say to my patients, is that you can simply go onto a place that we call PubMed. Now, PubMed is this place on the web where pretty much most scientific research for the last 40, 50 years is all up there. So, if you wanted to actually go and say, okay, so where's the science that says oatmeal's a poison?
But that would take too much effort. It's much easier to go on Instagram and get a heading.
But if you're okay with that, but this is the point, that it's just literally, I say to all my patients, you could go onto PubMed and put oatmeal, oatmeal benefits into PubMed, and if it doesn't show you up anything, then okay. But what happens is boom, 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 boom. You've got studies after studies after studies showing the benefits of oatmeal. So there's always two sides to the story. And if anyone is claiming anything, this is the best thing to do. No one knows, Sean. You know, I mean, how long have we been building your file? We've been building your file for 5 years. And I think we have an idea, a good idea, much more precision-led, precise-led. But I can't say we know it all. And so for people...
What we do know is we can get huge gains by doing some of the basics.
Totally, yeah.
And then we just fine-tune it along the way.
Yeah, and yeah. So, you know, I mean, we could argue for you is that a lot of this stuff is that you haven't done the basics well, or you didn't do them well enough. And we've also got some considerations around you. I mean, you know, your hips aren't great, are they? Let's face it. And we've had the conversation about you is that after all the work we've done, I said to you, my sort of concern about you in the future is going to be your hips. And so that's why we've started that process, haven't we? You know, we had this really nice process. And I think that's what's nice about the way we do, because we're connected to so many good people. We've already took you down that process, you know, consultant physiotherapist who led you to 2, you know, choices of amazing hip surgeons. And you've had that conversation. So at least we're clear about what our choices are going forward with your hips, because you know you have poor mobility there, and you know mobility.
I've got 0 cartilage.
Well, I know, and so, but at least we've got a plan. At least we've got a plan about, you know, if we're going to do it, then we can plan about how we're going to do it, and I can plan all the stuff around that with regards to how we're going to heal you quicker. What else can we do on that side? So we're consistently investing into the processes that we know at some stage are going to have to come up, and that goes for everyone. You know, regardless of how healthy you are, there's going to be something that ages more quickly than you would like. And regardless of how well you're looking after it, it's a little bit as we talked about you've got to give people the expectations that, you know, you are unique. And so, you know, it's like we talked about your body fat and trying to get that down. You're probably doing as good a job as you physically can. And, you know, unless you're going to go completely extreme, it's going to be a real struggle for you to take any more off. And so I've got to keep on reinforcing, mate, you're doing an amazing job. But you cannot think that you're going to look like, you know, an athlete who's got body fat at 10%, because you're not. And I think that nice bit of clarity, as you say, takes a lot of, you know, stress off you from a point of view of, you know, that's not possible. So that's why I always think it's important for us, particularly with business people, to think about what we're doing from a point of view of how simply you would do from a business. You know, you can't keep on putting resources into something that you're never going to get.
Well, I've treated myself as a business now. I've got my structure, I've got my morning routine written out that I don't really need to read anymore, because I know what my 10 things is that I need to do in the morning. And at least if I do 7 of them, that's okay. I'm not going to be so strict that if I do 9 and miss 1 that I'll beat myself up. I've got my structure for the afternoon. My go to bed regime is actually much better, where I'm setting myself 2 hours, 1 hour before bed. Right, this is what I'm doing. And so, but it sounds like, well, why have I not done this before? I've done it in my businesses. I've set structure in all my businesses, how to operate efficiently, but I haven't done it. Well, now I've done it, but it seems so obviously if I take care of myself, then all the other things will also be taken care of.
But you've had to learn that though. And I think, as I said, you know, we did a little webinar actually this week, me and Shelley, on goal setting, is that you've got to be able to build a structure that, and you've got to give it time, and you've got to be ready. And, you know, I think you've done a pretty good job, mate, over the years to be able to do that. And I think you also move into different stages of your life as well. So, and you become more comfortable with you. And as I say, a lot of I suppose my job is, as I said, I always, when our patients come in, I always say, look, here's my role. I'm a bit like the sort of conductor of the orchestra. So what I'm good at, as far as, you know, medicine and healthcare, is that when I have a complex patient that comes in with a whole host of things that's been wrong, and she's been to the cardiologist, she's been to the immunologist, she's been to the rheumatologist, these are all different departments, a little bit like an orchestra. I know how I can make it sort of when I have an orchestra that is playing poor music. I know how we need to get what we need to do, what stages we need to put in to start getting everything playing together well. But that doesn't mean to say that occasionally we've got to go over to the cardiologist to help me with that bit, because I'm not a specialist cardiologist, I'm not a specialist rheumatologist. The problem with that, of course, is that you've got to be able to go over to people who understand what you're doing and don't interfere with that and don't make different decisions. And that's only just coming forward at the moment. So we have some great cardiologists who, you know, when we go over them to say, look, we need you to do X, Y, and Z and let us know what you think, and then we'll bring it back into the file. So my role is, again, is to not, as I say, I can't do it all. And that's why, again, when we're talking about complex cases as well, that sometimes we'll have patients that come in who, you know, you see it a lot with fibromyalgia, you see it a lot with chronic fatigue, autoimmunity, where this patient has a very dominant picture of stress and trauma for wherever it's come from, and it just overhangs the file. And you know, when we're talking about getting people better and sort of root cause medicine, going to the root of what's the problem, yeah, I suppose when you've been doing it for such a long time, you identify very quickly those people where you're like, I don't think I can do the job that I need to do for you until someone's helping you sort of work out why your brain's interpreting the world in the way that it is. And usually, as you say, unfortunately, there's...
Do they when you spell it out to them like that?
That's a good question, because
get
I think this comes to the point where I would say 90% of them, it's almost like, holy shit, he knows me exactly. It's a little bit like when I told you about, let me tell you about you, Sean. When you've been working with genetics and that sort of stuff, or you've seen so many patients over years, you develop this instinctive feel about, you know, intuitive feel about, you know, what's going on and why it's going on. That's why I said to you, this is you, Sean. And you're like, that, how do you know? And I'm like, well, I can, you know, I can see it in your gene results. So you're going to do X, you're going to do X. This is the problem here. So I'd say about 90% of the patients who come in there are coming in because they're desperate and we're the last things. But when you tap into, I know you, I've got you as well. It's almost like, you know, we have a lot of tears in a lot of those initial consultations, because they're like that, holy fuck, you know, this guy actually gets the major problem. But that's when I'm like that, look, I'll be clear, you know, this part of this, whether it's psychiatry or psychology or whatever you want, I said, I'm not trained to give you the advice I need to give you. I mean, obviously we've dealt with a lot of, you know, we can use a lot of psychological techniques, but you need a real expert to help us sort of guide you on just opening that up so that your brain doesn't stay so hyper responsive to the outside world.
Is there links from being deficient in certain vitamins to your mental state?
Yeah, there's lots. Let me give you an example. Again, on a mental state, from a point of view of, we've had a couple of patients in the years past who've come to us with dementia-like symptoms, and they've been B12 deficient. So if you can be, and when I mean really deficient, B12 can manifest itself as looking like dementia. And which is super cool, because when you really give them a load of B12 at high dosages, it will change around very quickly. So that's kind of cool. You can also see people who, so again, when we do the genetics, part of the genetic areas that we look at is methylation. And methylation is this process where we're adding these, what we call methyl groups, to lots and lots of different biochemical reactions. And some people are born with gene variations, meaning that that methylation process, which again is pretty much happens all over the body across lots of biochemical pathways, but it's not working at the speed that you would like, and so you don't do things as efficiently, and as a consequence, you can build up certain weight, or not, I'm going to say waste product proteins, but you can build up proteins that actually in high levels can cause cardiovascular disease, be contributing. Same with Alzheimer's. So homocysteine would be one of those proteins. but when you don't methylate as quickly, and these methylation pathways are dominated. So imagine you've got all these cycles spinning at any one time. It's probably the easiest way to think about it. When you have someone who doesn't methylate normally, they undermethylate, they're not spinning as quick. And you need them to sort of spin at a certain time for you to sort of deliver everything. And the way those cycles are always working is that they have these cofactors that come in to sort of allow everything to spin, and B vitamins are the dominant ones on that. So B12, folic acid, B6, some of the other B vitamins as well. You've got to have them in adequate amounts to allow that to spin. So we see that all the time. And again, we talked about, I've been in practice 25 years now, and I've done thousands of some of the cool tests that we've done on you that are looking at nutrients. And as you said, nothing surprises me in this game, because we see people who, if you got them to put the food for the week on this table, you'd be like, wow, you're never going to have any problems with foods. You're going to get all your nutrients with food. Sean, I've never seen it in 25 years. And I can be confident to say to people that people, at least in my opinion, based off all the people we've seen over those years, are going to need at least a multivitamin mineral, and a good one.
Is this because of the quality of food now, or is it just, has it always been?
So that's a good argument, isn't it? Even if you're going for organic, I just think we're in a situation where we're pretty toxic soup. And whether that's the soil, whether that's the environment, whether that's the air around, I think we're under such assault from chemicals that I think your body has to probably work just on a daily basis. Just to give you just a lot harder than it needed to, even 20 years, 50 years ago. And so I've never been surprised. I've never seen anyone come back on those tests that we do with you, and it's like, oh, it's perfect. Never seen it. So it's, and that, you could argue, but all you do is see sick people. And it's like, well, it's not all the business, because you're not a sick person. And of course we have that, 10% who are there because they are super healthy and they're trying to do the longevity stuff. And it's the same with them. We've just never seen it.
I had this sort of simple, well, I thought it was simple that, well, I'll just supplement more. I'll take more magnesium, whatever I'm deficient in. I just thought I can just, but it's not as easy as that, is it? You can't just add more supplementation to counteract, because then it can send, it's like this.
I think there's this is literally a podcast on its own, the supplementation side. So I'll try and give you a few briefs on that. Is that it's a pretty shitty industry in many ways, because a lot of the stuff that you're going to get in the shops that are probably reasonably priced aren't going to be great stuff. So it's not doing what it sort of says it's doing on the tin. I'm not saying that's for everything.
This was a shock for me when you were telling me
Well,
this.
of course. I mean, and the reality is that there are very stringent guidelines that some of the best companies in the world go through, because what they're trying to say is our product has gone through all the clearance. It's pure. We've put it through tests. It's been third-party analysed, but that's why it's going to cost you 4 to 5 times more than what you can get down the road.
So my vitamin C tablets with loads of sugar in them that I've bought out of the supermarket, I thought they were good for me, but...
Well, look, there are certain products where actually they're quite cheap to manufacture. So like vitamin C is sort of one of them where, I'm not that bothered where you've got it from too much.
Some of the ones had
because actually it's just really cheap to do. I mean, you might get some sort of extra stuff that comes with it that you probably don't need. But some of the more advanced ones, I mean, glutathione would be one example that we get, and we get that for you. But it's going to cost you nearly £100 a tub. That's going to last you, a couple of months. But it's the real deal. And, if you've got the money, it's the same thing. It's a question of how much you want to invest into it. And remember, we're giving you stuff based off test data. So we're being incredibly precision-led, and we're trying to give you the daily dose based off your test data. So we're not guessing. I think one of the downsides, and again, I think this is just I think where people get the supplementation aspect wrong, is that they think they're going to take a supplement and it's going to solve their ills. And in general, it couldn't be any further from the truth. So most people that we supplement, unless it's like a little bit like we talked about, the really frank deficiencies, a bit like iron deficient anemia, a bit like proper B12 deficiency, where either your energy level's in the floor or you've almost got sort of, almost feels like early stage dementia. When you give them at very high quality and very high dosage for a period of time, therapeutic dosages, you see the real benefit from that. You know, on a daily basis, wow, suddenly my mind's coming. But obviously if we're doing that, then we've got them in a rigid test-retest pattern that we do with you sometimes. When you've got a daily, I think what people think is that I'm going to buy this energy product from so-and-so and it's going to solve my energy issues. I think that's where there's a disparity. It didn't work. It was rubbish. You know, so we've had that part, you know, that 50 quid thing that you got me, it was like absolutely rubbish, didn't change anything. And we go, well, what were you expecting? You think it was going to make you better? Because this thing has done the job exactly that we wanted it to do, because we've got the test data to prove it. Here's where your levels were before. Here's where it is now. And I think there's a disparity, I think, with people taking single things, thinking it's going to solve their very complex diseases. And as you know, sometimes we've got you on 7 or 8 different things based off test data, and you might not feel a difference on a daily basis.
Bringing it back down to something simple that we should all understand, but yet a lot of us are deficient in, is vitamin D.
Yeah. So me and you, as you say there, yeah, let's get on to the logic of this. I think this is where, if you look at the NHS guidelines, their guidelines are suggesting that 400 IUs a day is, you know, what the standard guidelines are. I don't know why. Again, I don't know why they stay at that, Sean. And I think if you ever wanted to make the lowest hanging fruit change to healthcare, that would be the cheapest as chips, saving billions of pounds a year, you should be taking anyone over 60 and probably giving them 1, maybe 2,000 IUs of vitamin D free all the way through the winter, or from autumn onwards. You would save billions of pounds, no doubt about that. But we just don't. It's because we're in a disease care model, not a preventative care model.
And how many people is there asking for these changes or mentioning them or talking about them? Because I now know. It seems obvious.
Well, I mean, we could look at you and we could look at you could look at me as an example. What we've done with you is we've done a very robust dig into vitamin D genetics. Mm-hmm. So again, look, if you give me a few minutes, I'll give you a sort of vitamin D metabolism 101. So me and you have got really poor genes with regards to this. So for the best place to get your vitamin D is the sun. So half the reason why most people, you know, and there's massive meta-analyses that have been done over decades, where particularly, you know, the more, you know, sort of like Scotland, where, you know, a very significant proportion of the population are vitamin D deficient. And of course, the problem with that is that it, from an immunological point of view, it puts you much more at risk of colds and infections in the winter, which is why I'm saying you could save billions of pounds of just giving people free vitamin D. Why we don't do it, I don't know. But you generally get, vitamin D is always best from the sun. And when that sun hits your skin, it sort of interacts with cholesterol and you make vitamin D. But you make inactive vitamin D, and that transports down to the liver, and you've got a couple of pathways in the liver. I can't remember the pathway. It's one of the CY450 pathways. 25 hydroxylase, that's it. So what happens is that inactive vitamin D has to come through the liver, and it goes through 2 chemical reactions where basically what's happening is the liver is changing that inactive vitamin D to active vitamin D. Now, we know me and you have gene variations on 25 hydroxylase that means that we don't do that conversion very well. So there's already a problem for us. And then once you've done that, you have to get on what we call the vitamin D binding protein, which is a little bit like the bus that picks it all up. So you've got active vitamin D being made, and then you've got to put it on the bus, and then the bus takes it all the way around the body and drops it off at the cells. Every cell in the body has a vitamin D receptor. Now, the bus, so already me and you have making from inactive to active. We don't do that very well. And then getting on the bus, for me and you, our buses don't turn up that often because we've got gene variations that mean our buses aren't that great. So we don't get transported around as well. And then when we get to the cell where the vitamin D receptor sits, waiting to take the active vitamin D, dock it into the receptor, and then the receptor can tell the cell to do what it needs to do from the vitamin D message. We've got really crappy vitamin D receptors. So at every stage of that vitamin D metabolism, getting it to do the work it needs to do in a cell, you've got problems and I've got problems, which means that it doesn't matter how much sun you're going to get in the summer, and we've done this because we've tested you.
The equator.
Yeah, and that's the, let me get back to that, is that we end up at the end of the summer with vitamin D levels that look strangely subnormal given the amount of sun that we've had. And so what it means for you, as you know, is that I have to test your vitamin D levels twice a year. I do it end of the summer, early autumn, because I want to know how well we've done through the summer. And then I want to do it round about now, because I want it, which we've just done, because I want to see how well we've done. Because you're an individual like me who probably needs to be supplemented most of the year because you never make enough. And it's such an important part of the puzzle, you know, this pro-hormone. It's not really a vitamin, but it has so many functions, and we just don't do it. And the requirements for what you need, you know, if you're going to NHS, is just way off. And again, I don't know why we're still stuck on that, because and again, well, I think because, as I said to you, I think it is as naive as we're in a disease care model, so we don't think about putting in major preventative processes, and I don't understand why we don't do that. But you know, I think it's almost been going on for such a long time. You sort of, well, you know, it's not going to happen anyway, because people just don't think in that way. Whether or not that's going to change, mate, as I said to you, you know, there were 2 major studies that came out of Spain that were looking at very high boluses of vitamin D given to COVID patients when they came to the ER rooms. 2 big studies that came in Spain really early on when we had Delta. And they showed if they had early infection in the ER room, given them very high dosages of vitamin D for their stay, reduced intensive care by 70%, showing how powerful it was, completely ignored. And that was when I started going, this is starting to smell a little bit ratty for me. Why wouldn't you jump on that? I mean, if that was a drug, those scientists would be winning a Nobel Prize for medicine because of the amount, but they were ignored. And to say, and that's why unfortunately, you know, what's happened is that, you know, what the hell's going on with this? If you got such a, you know, if we're in this sort of emergency use vaccines that they said, imagine if you had a study like that came out and said, all we did was give them a shitload of vitamin D, and it reduced, you know, intensive care, you know, because that was all the thing, wasn't it? The whole thing we were locked down is because we wanted to save the NHS. We wanted to make sure that, you know, there was enough room for us to, you know, for the NHS to work, and yet, you know, 70% reduction, they didn't do anything about it. So I just think, you know, maybe that disease care model doesn't look at the preventative side, and these are such easy things to do.
It's a pleasure to be on the journey for myself. It's a pleasure for you to help me on this journey, and the impact you've had on me, and the impact that, you know, I know you have globally is
I don't know about that.
Is quite incredible, and just. Yeah, again, thank you for everything you've done for me.
It's been a pleasure so far, mate.
And I look forward to our continued journey that's going to last for a long time.
Yeah, hopefully, yeah.
Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please consider watching some of our other fascinating chats here. If you'd like to stay up to date with all the latest podcasts, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell below.